What is the biggest oh holy frick moment you've had? Got rear-ended in a hit and run while taking an exit off 395 in VA. Got spun around. Had no control of the car at all and just saw the wall coming faster and faster. I was fine. My date was fine. My car was royally fricked. One of my only fears. You have no control over that situation. No matter how careful you are as a driver, there's always going to be crazy people. Almost got shot during army basic. We were doing the bounding live fire lane, in which you and another soldier repeatedly bound behind cover to an objective, while shooting pop-up targets. There's a drill sergeant behind both of us watching. IDK what happened but not even halfway across the lane. He yells bounding, I respond got you covered, and proceed to fire at the targets. The other guy decides to say frick everything that the sergeants have been smashing into our skulls when it comes to moving with a loaded weapon. That is, when you get up to move up. In training, you're required to flip the weapon to safe. Get your goddamn finger out of the trigger well and fricking keep the muzzle pointed down range directly in front of you. This guy didn't do any of that. He starts to move. I'm behind a burned out car firing. Next thing I know freaking round hits the hood of the car I'm kneeling behind. Followed by my bad bro. I almost crapped my pants. That wasn't even more than 2 feet from my face. The drill sergeant that was assigned to watch him didn't pay attention, but it turned out when he was bounding, he managed to trip over a wheel well, clenched up and squeezed the trigger, while of course the barrel was pointed towards me. Never saw my drill sergeant truly angry before. She grabbed that sucker by the back of his Kevlar vest, old as crap, but have a handle on the back to drag battle buddies, and dragged his butt off the range and was just short of beating him. Needless to say, he wasn't allowed a weapon for a while after that incident. Dr almost got shot. My bad bro is probably understatement of the year in this instance. A buddy of mine and I went skiing at Ski Apache near Ruidoso, New Mexico a few years back. The mountain pass to the ski area is a steep and winding road. While we were skiing it started snowing and by the time we were ready to leave the road had iced over completely. A very slow and long line of cars was slowly making its way down the mountain when we departed. We didn't have tire chains, but we were in a Ford Bronco, so thought nothing of driving down the mountain. At first the drive down the mountain seemed fine, but soon we started sliding on the ice. Rather than attempting to stop the Bronco we just crawled along slowly, tapping the brakes at hardest to make sure they didn't lock up. Maybe 10 minutes into the drive things started changing and the Bronco was sliding on every corner and the brakes started locking up every time I tapped on them. We put the transmission into low to help slow it down but nothing was helping and we just barely made it through each curve without sliding off the road. Soon the long line of cars started stopping ahead of us and we had trouble slowing enough to avoid a collision. To make matters worse, we started sliding toward the unprotected edge every time we slipped. This went on for just a few minutes when we realized we could no longer control the Bronco at all. It was slowly sliding toward the edge and we were going with it unless we jumped out and let it go over the edge. Just before we were about to jump I spotted some rocks near the edge. I told my buddy to grab the wheel and take the driver's seat when I jumped and if it didn't stop to jump out after me. I jumped, grabbed the rocks and shoved them under the front tires, stopping the Bronco just a couple of feet from the edge. Reading that story made me break out in a sweat. I had been at the Shelby Center all day, science building on the UAH campus, with my then 7-year-old daughter. We left at 3, picked up my son, dropped by the store, and came home. I got on the computer and checked our local news only to read the headline 10 people shot at Shelby Center. My husband was still on campus, and at the time I thought he was at Shelby. It was hours before we knew it was only 6 people shot, midnight before we had any names. I can't describe the utter panic of knowing that my husband and friends might be dead. I screamed. I couldn't make my hands stop shaking long enough to dial my husband's number. It occurred to me later that if that crazy freaking BA Bishop had shot the faculty members at the beginning of that meeting instead of at the end, my kid and I would have been there for it. When I called my mom after a mass shooting in my hometown and expressed my shock, she told me she was at the shooting and the shooter was on top of her. I slammed to the ground shaking and at a loss for words. She was next to the very last person to get shot before he started to reload and was tackled. I'll never forget, and still can't forget, The feeling that his gun was pointed at her. He pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. I'll also never forget how grateful I am for those two brave men that stopped the shooter. Thank you, Bill Badger and Roger Sulzberger. The phrasing makes it sound like your mom answered her phone in the middle of struggling with the shooter and just nonchalantly told you what was going on, before asking if you ate enough fiber today. Dancing on the ice singing Jehovah, Jehovah, Monty Python Life of Brian style, when there was a crack sound and the ice crazed all around me. Oh holy frick. Time stopped, and it was a bit like when Wile E. Coyote runs off a cliff and hangs there for a couple of seconds. Splash. I went on a field trip to a small amusement park called Adventureland in Iowa when I was in middle school. I was in the front car of a wooden coaster by myself. The safety bar came down. The attendant tugged on it. The roller coaster bumps forward and up goes the bar. I'm shouting for them to stop the ride, but they don't. So I wrap my arms around the bar and try to brace my feet the best I can. The underside of the car is rounded so there's nowhere to hook my feet into. I go through the entire terrifying ride, which fortunately had no loops, just an extended sideways turn, and make it back safely. I spent the rest of the day on the log flume. Laying on the couch in Grandpa's motorhome going down the freeway when Grandpa passed out and just slumped over with cruise control on at 65 miles per hour. Went off-road heading straight for a palm tree. I remember laying on the couch and seeing Grandma dive from the passenger seat to try to grab the wheel right as we smashed into the palm tree. Everything was slow and I knew I was about to die, especially with no seatbelt on. Turns out, motorhomes going 65 miles per hour bring with them a metric crap ton of inertia. Slamming into the tree kicked off the cruise control and just tore the tree right out of the ground at the base of the trunk. We slowly coasted to a stop in the grass. Grandpa was medevaced to a hospital where they determined the cause to be conflicting medications. That was 10 years ago and all three of us are totally fine to this day. They did go ahead and get a new motorhome though. Was expecting a tragic ending with both grandparents dead through windshield and you hurt badly. Was pleasantly surprised at real ending. Glad you are okay. Realizing who, what, and where I was after experiencing ego death on 40x Salvia. Salvia has a tendency to induce ego death, the removal of the conscious part of your awareness that identifies as you. All your memories, hopes, dreams, and fears, almost surgically removed. The sensation is how a PC must feel when it reboots into DOS mode instead of Windows. Towards the end of the experience I had the earth-shattering realization of who I was, where I was, and how I got there. It's like building your consciousness from the ground up in a period of a minute or so. It was actually a surprisingly grounding experience. It made me feel as if I could endure anything in my life and still be okay, because I had been entirely removed before and it wasn't so bad. Used a bunch of drugs at a party one night, blacked out, came to in the driver's seat, going 80 miles per hour, the wrong direction on interstate, immediately freaked out, pulled over to the emergency lane, turned my car the correct direction and put it in park. After regaining my composure, I called a friend to pick me up. Scariest moment of my life. A few days ago I was just wondering what goes through someone's mind when they go the wrong way on the freeway. Now I know that they don't know either. Congrats on being clean though. When I realized only Righty was down there at age 15. Not the thing an introverted male sophomore in high school wants to discover and have surgery for. Oh lord, the social awkwardness during the recovery phase. In 2007 when I saw crush wire coming out of a pothole on MSR Tampa in Iraq right before I ran over it. The three of us saw it at the same time about 1 second before death. We all had something to say. Possible last words. Gunner, crap me. Driver, AWW frick TC. Balls gunner took a direct blast to the face and I took shrapnel to the knee. Pucker factor level, maximum. 3 years ago, this coming Wednesday, when the driver of a SUV decided that he also liked my lane, so would also drive in it. There was a minor problem with that. He was headed in the opposite direction than I was. I was deep in the rainforest of Madagascar, on top of a mountain, living in tents with a group of absolutely insane researchers, who happened to be some of my best friends. I was studying insects, but we had primatologists, herpetologists, botanists, cultural anthropologists, and loads of other specialists there as well, not to mention about a dozen Malagasy technicians and guides. The site was so remote it was about 20 kilometers from the nearest paved road, and took us about 12 hours on foot to reach it, due to the mountainous terrain. So naturally, when we got there we decided we needed desperately to smoke a joint. Myself, my good friend, and our research leader rolled up a truly massive beast of a joint, out of the seediest, nastiest, driest weed ever, in the middle of the forest. As we were smoking, we saw some flashlights in the distance. Strangely, my research leader started freaking out, screaming holy motherfucking crap, it's the black magic guardians, and ran like heck through this dense butt jungle, sprinting away from flashlights bouncing along behind us. My friend and I had literally zero idea what the heck was going on. We ran for about 10 minutes, until we were well away from the lights. I asked what that was all about, and my research leader responded, "Holy crap man, those guys were DZAMAAKA, black magic guardians. The villagers say they have magic powers. They carry freaking swords. They say that they kill bandits and crap. These guys are crazy, man." I was amazed and dumbfounded. I wound up meeting the Zama another day in camp. They did carry swords. They also wore Stetsons and old basketball jerseys from American teams. They were surprisingly okay guys, and they gave us a bottle of moonshine to thank us for giving them rice and headlamps. Man, I miss Madagascar. TLDR. Chased through a rainforest by sword-wielding maniacs. To this day, I still have to remind myself that herpetologists have nothing to do with herpes. I was maybe 14. My little brother was 6. Standing at the edge of a quarry, I was walking up to him to ask him to come away from the edge. It was about a 40 feet drop into boulders when, seen out of the movies, the ground gave way under him. I teleported to the edge. Having lost sight of him, I threw my arm over the edge as he fell and somehow grabbed his wrist as he fell. I calmly said, "I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to haul you up, so you might have to climb." He nodded, wide-eyed. Clearly, adrenaline kicked in. I threw him over my head, back up onto the ledge. We didn't tell our dad for about 20 years. Brendan, not sure if you're a Redditor or not. Seems me as the kind of thing you'd do. Glad I saved your butt, little buddy. Whenever my foot suddenly kicks that part of the sidewalk that's a bit uneven and I feel like I'm falling for a split second. Similarly, catching the lip of the stair tread and stumbling up the stairs. Definitely when I was at Myrtle Beach when I was little with my family. We were swimming in the ocean and my sisters were pretty far out from the beach. My dad yelled, "Girls, come back. You're getting too far out," and when they turned towards him swimming as furiously as they could and not moving, yelling, "I can't," I just froze. Luckily some real strong guy swam out there and got them. Thank God. Driving home with my brother from his school, I made a left turn a little too sharp and proceeded to hydroplane through the intersection. I then had to explain what hydroplaning was and why he should never tell our parents. When I was treading water in the middle of a pool with my wife, we look over to see our 2-year-old running towards the 10-foot end. My parents were supposed to be watching her. Right off the side she went and sank like a rock to the bottom. I had to swim, with a torn labrum and rotator cuff mind you, from the center of the pool over 25 feet and down 10 to reach her. The entire time I was thinking, she's a goner already. No way she could have held her breath so long, let alone at all. She knows nothing of holding her breath. We had just watched a documentary on Discovery that the newborn breath holding reflex goes away after age of 1. This was pure, gut-wrenching terror on so many levels. Hoping she wasn't dead. Hoping I wouldn't fail to get there in time. Hoping I would not fail in finding her on the first shot. Hoping I wouldn't run out of air. Hoping I could do it. It was all on me, and I gotta tell you, my track record of failing at crap is pretty much 100%. I got a hold of her leg and held on like a vice and made the split-second decision to swim rather than continue down a few more feet to thrust off. I got to the top but only had a leg as I was trying desperately to hold her out of the water while I treaded. With my other hand I kept trying to grab her head to get it up too. As you can imagine, only having a leg, her head was down in the water. No one was helping. A pool of 50 people and no one was freaking helping at all. I thought, this can't be. Someone has to help. Are you serious? Are you freaking kidding me? No one? Is she still even alive? Will these lost seconds cost her her life? Finally my mom grabbed her and pulled her out. Wide-eyed, she took a deep breath. I lost my freaking crap. The relief overloaded my senses and I started shaking and crying. I hugged her for like 30 minutes straight as we sat on a chair and cried. Later I said, "What were you thinking?" Her words still make me tear up. I felt daddy. I was so scared and I was underwater and looked for you and mommy everywhere, but you weren't there. I was crying mommy, daddy, and I held my breath. Then you saved me. Oh Reddit, I felt helpless and petrified with fear for days. Even now when I think of how close and what if this, what if that. Well, I was about 14, maybe 13, and just moved up north to Illinois from Texas. Well, I had never seen snow or ice except in cartoons. Keep that in mind when I tell this story. I had a Japanese friend, Young Jun, and him and his buddy wanted to run across the highway to another complex with a small lake thing. Now in my ignorance of ice I assumed if the top was frozen it was just a giant ice cube. They dared me to run out on this lake and I was like LOL okay. Little did I know, this was one of those lakes with a suction thing at the bottom of it that makes a whirlpool under the water. I ran out there banging on the ice having a good time until I took one step too far. I plunged under the water and started sink. Guess what my friends did? They ran away from me about to die. Anyway, I'm not sure how I did it, but I guess the adrenaline fooled my swimming and I was already a strong swimmer anyway, and I got back to the giant hole I made. I kept screaming oh frick and smashing more and more ice towards the shore. Eventually I got to the thicker ice and pulled myself up. I went home and took off my clothes and waited till I could feel my limbs again. Then took a shower and slowly turned the water up in heat like I normally did due to a disability I have. Looking back, I was probably hypothermic and this ritual of slowly heating up probably saved me. Anyway, Young Jun's mom came up and gave my stepdad cookies saying how sorry she was I died in the ice in broken English. I got yelled at after that, haha. This took forever to type on my phone, so I hope it doesn't get buried. Young Jun sounds Korean. Holding my first child after he was born. Holy frick. I'm responsible for this tiny person? You're just going to let me walk out of here with him? Yep. If it's a natural childbirth they usually give tea to the mom to begin breastfeeding. But with a C-section, mom's on the table so they give it to dad. I mean, they wrapped it up and just stuck it in my arms. At least with FedEx you have to sign for it first. Used to work in a bank. Giant snowstorm one day. Really not busy. More or less the only employee on the floor at the time. Two guys come in. One breaks out a freaking shotgun. Second guy hops the counter and tells me to open all the drawers. We didn't use a cash dispenser at that branch. Guy who was taking the cash was wearing giant gloves, the kind you wore when you were a kid with the velcro wrist straps, and has a plastic bag hooked to his pinky fingers. Guy who was taking cash drops plastic bag, hit the ground and money flies all over the dang place. Instantly, I crack a laugh, then think this is how I die, and then shortly thereafter think, well, at this range I'd probably survive that one. Keeping a sense of humor in a hostile situation. Bravo. Stopped at the postbox on the way to work to post a letter. Was in a hurry and jumped out the car without realizing I'd left the handbrake off and the car in gear. Had to chase the car down the hill. Got a bunch of these. This is my most recent. Cruising down the highway at 3 AM with cruise set at 75 miles per hour. Minding my own, listening to some late night country. Out of the median rolls a goddamn freaking semi-truck wheel. Yeah, big butt tire on a big butt steel rim. Bricks were shat. Evasive maneuvers were made. Missed the tire by inches and kept myself out of a ditch. Few miles late, caught up to a truck throwing sparks, missing a rear wheel. Flashed my lights to get him to pull over. He had no clue he was missing a wheel. Over half the brake drum and wheel hub were worn away. Was probably 6 or 7 miles between where I almost hit the tire and when I caught up to him. TLDR. Oh holy frick. Just had an emergency C-section. The doctor said, if we had waited even another few hours, we would have lost the baby. Holy frick. I was also born C-section. If you look at me, you can't tell I was born C-section. But when I leave the house, I go out the window. Habit, I guess. When I was 19 I was shot in the head by a preteen. The bullet entered on the left side of my forehead at the hairline and stopped behind and above my ear. I never lost consciousness and the bullet was removed without general anesthesia. Elaborate, goddammit. I was having what can only be described as the crap of my life. It was a dark and stormy night. Sweat was pouring down my face as I was trying to get this piece of crap out. Then with all my might I pushed. Rumor has it even God himself held his breath. As it came out everything went dark. I couldn't see. Frick what have I done, I said. Did I crap so hard that I'm now blind? Turns out the power went out, but you know. Sliding backwards at 100 plus mph with the abs sputtering and a limited slip diff doing nothing and realizing there was nothing that could be done to stop the imminent tree impact. Time slowed down like the Matrix. Then impact. Time sped up tenfold. Then months of pain with 3 broken ribs seemed to drag though lol. I love the lol at the end of that story. This will probably get buried, but it's a pretty good one. I was an exchange student in Belgium a couple years ago, living with a host family and generally having an awesome time exploring the many hundreds of Belgian bars. Well, one night I went to a party in my friend's town about 30 minutes away from my host family. I ended up getting drunk and missing the last train back to my host family's house. Crap, since I was already at the train station, I decided to hitchhike home. Some guys pulled up, blasting music, looking generally friendly, and they were going in my direction. Cool, awesome, problem solved. We were driving for maybe 20 minutes when the driver pulls off the highway. The talking and laughter dies down and the car gets eerily silent as we pull onto a dirt road in the middle of some sketchy Belgian fields. I don't want to be rude, but I have to ask what's going on. The driver turns off the car and all 3 guys turn to look at me. Well, you see, this is when we kill you, he said. French being my second language, it took a moment to process. Then I almost barfed. I have never been that afraid. They all burst into laughter and drove back onto the highway, dropping me off right in front of my house, even though it was out of the way. Crap, man. I hope you got those guys' names and numbers because that crap would put them on my BFF list. Without a freaking doubt. Last night, I live in Annapolis, and a transformer blew last night. It was quite a ways away, but it lit up the freaking night sky at 10:17 at night. Every color of the goddamn rainbow for 3 minutes. I honestly thought it was the end of the world. When my mother was running out of the house yelling that my brother was hit by a truck. When I was 13 and my mom woke me up crying and saying my dad had been in a wreck and she needed to get to the hospital right now. For 3 days we didn't know if he'd make it. 5 ribs broken in 2 places each. Punctured lung, punctured spleen, broken neck, broken collarbone and many other issues. 3 weeks in the hospital, a year out of work, and he's fine. Scariest experience of my life. TLDR. I broke the jump drive that my only copy for a final paper was on. I spent all night typing it too. I called work hysterical and said I couldn't be there. Also, emailed professor, and I immediately started again, from scratch, at 6-7 am. My class was at 1. I made it to class with 5 minutes to spare. I almost didn't even get to give my presentation. Only 5 minutes or so left in class. I told professor, there's no way I'm not going today. I kept it short and sweet, and still got an A. Win. This, folks, is why you always make backup copies. I have work at a local, small town restaurant during breaks from school. I have been working part-time at this place since I was 15. Over the Christmas break, I waited on the most horrible table I have ever had the displeasure of servicing. There were 9 people and they sought out to make my life a living heck. However, through it all, they received impeccable service and all was well. That was, until I went to collect my tips and realized that they left me nothing. My blood boiled and for the first time in my life, I had a moment. I asked the other workers if any customers were left in the place. They said no. I proceeded to launch into a tirade of motherfucks and goddammits. Then one of the customers walks out of the bathroom, right next to me. Don't feel bad about that. I think I would have reacted the same way. Getting into my first car accident. I slowed down too fast for the train tracks when the gate started to drop and a lady slammed her car into the back of mine, shoving me over the first set of 3 train tracks. All I remember was panicking and putting the pedal to the floor so I didn't get hit by the train. You didn't slow down too fast. She was speeding or not looking. Maybe both. I joined the military on my 21st birthday, went to basic at Featuring, Benning, spent a total of a month at my unit at Featuring, Hood before I deployed. So I had around 4 months in the army and I found myself in Baghdad. We rolled in armor, brads and tanks, big guns. We get a call over the net that an Iraqi National Guard truck just got pulped by an EFP, explosively formed projectile, while crossing a bridge. So we head over to see if we can find some bad guys, but mostly to see if the AIM guys are alive. They aren't. The truck looks like you shot a soda can with a .357 and all the occupants are liquefied except the gunner, who's laying in a pool of his own organs 100 meters down the road. No helping him. Shortly after we arrive we notice the Iraqi police pull up on the other side of the bridge. There's an IP station about a half a click up the road. The AIM guys start getting pee, accusing the IP guys of setting this whole thing up. My bosses get busy trying to defuse the situation. My team leader yells back to me, "Gutter, go get some body bags and an e-tool, folding shovel. You're gonna scoop this mess up so we can bury these guys." Well crap. So I head back to the HMMWV and jump up on the truck, popping it open so I can dig around for the BBs. Then I hear what sounds like pops. Now, I've been trained on all manner of weapon systems by this time, but I'd never actually been shot at, so I didn't realize that I was being shot at. Standing on the back of the truck, looking around with this confused, stupid expression on my face. Turns out the AIM was really pee at the IP, and they do not frick around. They weren't shooting at me specifically, they were shooting at the IP and I just happened to be in the way. A group of them surrounded the IP truck, shot the tires out, and filled it full of death in the time it took me to say, "What is happening?" My platoon sergeant yells from behind the cover truck, "Gutter, get your stupid butt down here and under cover. Now." Oh crap, I run to cover, and here it comes. The most oh holy frick moment of my life. My platoon sergeant grabs me by my armor, lifts all 300-ish lbs of me with one hand, slams me into the truck and gets so close to my grill that his stubble is scraping off my stubble. He said, "Gutter, you scared the crap out of me. Nobody scares the crap out of me. Next time you try to get yourself killed, don't bother, I'll kill you myself." To which I replied, weakly, "Roger, never been more scared in my life. TLDR, you see some fricked up stuff in Iraq, but old fogey soldiers are still the scariest thing in the war zone." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.